Down-home blues music. Blues music is generally believed to have emerged sometime between the Civil War and the turn of the 20th century. Our textbook tells us that it first evolved as a distinctive style, again, near that time. So there were roots of blues music that were showing up earlier. You found some of the elements that show up in the blues music in the work songs, the field hollers, the spirituals, and certainly blues music, which showed up about the same time as ragtime music, seemed to share some of the same qualities as that idiom as well. As a matter of fact, the Piedmont blues often carries a very strong ragtime feel. The roots of blues music, as I say, go further back. They go to the field hollers. They go to some of the secular tunes that were showing up in the 1800s in the African American traditions. The subject matter goes back that far too. They sang songs about mistreatment, money problems, a lot of adversity, relationship differences between men and women as well. So many of the same subjects that you might expect to hear, even in the 20th century protest music as well. Now, here's a question that we might want to examine. Why? We've found out now how blues music emerged, but why did it emerge? What stimulated this giant leap in musical innovation? Our textbook reminds us that there were actually several reasons why blues developed and why blues developed when it developed around the turn of the century. Number one, the emancipation of African Americans had not really resulted in a truly free society. Jim Crow racism, the Jim Crow laws, added misery and hard times to the African American community. You've probably heard the saying that was used often back then. The doctrine was essentially separate but equal. Thankfully, we live in a society now where our courts have realized and ruled that separate is never equal. Ku Klux Klan activity was at a very high level, and so there were a large number of terrible lynchings and just a terrible situation for the African Americans who were living, for the most part, still in the South. Also, the guitar was made much more readily available. So people could now order mail order guitars in the catalogs. And this contributed to the proliferation of blues music. It inspired people. There are many who would say that the guitar was kind of ideally suited to this sound. It was good at mimicking the sound of the voice. It was somewhat easy to play. It was affordable. It was portable. It was practical. Some of the ways that it was good at mimicking the voice, the notes can ring out a long time. I could go. I can make them ring a long time. I can also change those notes. So I can do a lot of interesting shadings that will remind you somewhat of what the voice does as well. The primary chords, the 1, 4, 5, were somewhat easy to play. So you can see I could do some of those things really just 1 or 2 fingers at a time. Early blues recordings were often really reflective of the jazz trends, the popular trends in music that were going on in the 19 teens, the 20s, and the 30s, essentially using jazz orchestras and jazz instruments, the horns and so forth, a little bit more like the big band sound. Oftentimes the women who were so popular in blues, the ladies named blues that were described as blues queens, like Mamie Smith, Bessie Smith, Ma Rainey, used this format, and it was wildly successful. They had some major hits that really sold to large audiences. Ed Andrews, on the flip side, stayed with more the country blues approach in his recordings, as did many of the 1920s artists, Robert Johnson, Son House, Blind Willie Johnson, just to name a few. Standardization, again, really impacted the blues music. The form became very much the same from one tune to the next, which helped the listener to really relate to one tune after the other. It also helped, especially in the case of large combos, the musicians to adapt very, very quickly. This was the format preferred by the blues queens, by the women blues singers. The early country blues players did not usually subscribe to this format. The blues changed, though. Why did it change? Well, change is inevitable. For artists, that's part of what we do. But I think more than that, blues became more commercial. People were looking to expand their reach and their audience. Rhythm and blues became very popular, which was a little bit of a larger combo for the men singers like Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and Louis Jordan. Essentially, the idea was that you could now have a guitar player and a singer playing with a band, a small combo, maybe a drum kit, a bass, and a harmonica or a saxophone, maybe a couple of guitars or whatever, but very similar to what you would have found in early rock and roll. This was an immediate predecessor and a direct influence on artists like Elvis Presley and the people who really were thought of as the first rockabilly and rock artists. Muddy Waters was one of these people. He was at the forefront of this movement. He was influenced by the earlier country blues players, but he added electrified instruments into a small combo so that he could be heard in the more loud clubs that he played in the south side of Chicago, as did his main, I guess you could say, artistic rival, Howlin' Wolf. Little Walter, of course, playing in the band. You had lots of people in Chicago who subscribed to this sound, the small combo with electrified guitars, bass, drums, and possibly a saxophone, as I say, or a harmonica. So again, we're talking about something very, very similar to what you find in a early rock or rockabilly combo.